It's Monday. Are you ready for Abe and I to spill the tea on what we thought about the Meghan and Harry interview with Oprah? Before we really jump into it, I just want you to know that I took a visit to the British cafe that we have on base, and I got some scones and cream and jelly, and all that stuff comes from England. How dope is that?
They're pretty good.
Yeah, and you offended me because when I made you the scone, first of all, you asked if it was a crumpet, and second of all, you just ate the cream.
You pulled out tea, and I was like, oh, it's tea and crumpets, duh. I still don't know what crumpets are.
I don't either. I'm big into scones, and those scones are really good that they serve at the Brit Cafe, and I think it's hella dope that cream comes from England.
I thought it was Cool Whip.
It's not Cool Whip. So you're supposed to eat it on the scone, and you just licked it off, and then you ate the scone
good.
with the jelly.
It looked like ice cream.
I'm never taking you to high noon tea. All I'm saying. So
I'll lick the crumpet there, or whatever that is.
It's a scone.
That sounds dirty. All right, let's go.
It does sound dirty. All right, no. So everybody has been blowing all social media platforms up with the aftermath of what they thought of the interview. And I was like, we have to get into this. We have to have a conversation. We need to do it on the podcast. I have so many things to say. For me personally, I was triggered throughout the interview because to me, Meghan represents so much. She represents the majority of the world, I feel like, because people look at her and they relate to her in different ways. And part of hearing Harry's story during the interview, I related a lot and was triggered a lot to what he said, just like from past experiences. I'm like, I know that look, I know that saying, I've been in those shoes on a much smaller level. But what did you think? Were you annoyed? Were you like with it?
Well, it was pretty interesting. Part of me was kind of annoyed, and part of me was like, at least for Meghan, I was like, yeah, that seems hard. And part of it, I was annoyed with Prince Harry. I would say the type of privilege.
How could you?
Yeah, well, the type of privilege he comes from, and then he's like, kind of asking. He's kind of, It's like, he's privileged, right? He comes from a life of luxury, and he has millions of dollars that he inherited from his mom, Princess Diana. And then he's gonna sit there and be like, I've been cut off financially. You don't know how hard that is. And I'm like, come on, bro. We're looking forward to stimulus checks over here. Like, that's pretty privileged of you to say, and then and on the same interview, sit down and then be like, I just bought a beautiful home down the street, and then they hinted that where they lived was down the street from Oprah, because Oprah's like, I live down the street from you, and I'm like, here's this billionaire woman that you casually live on the same street, and you're talking about how you've been cut off financially and you don't know how hard that is, and if it wasn't for what your mom had allocated for you, you wouldn't be able to make it. I'm like, man, like, I hate being one of those people. It's like, must be nice, because I don't really like that mentality. But I was like, man, like, how are you gonna sit here and then really, really just look past the fact that you inherited like $30 million and that's supposedly all you had?
I don't think it's fair that you're being that person. And I think that you have to get some perspective, because this is somebody who, yes, first of all, money does not solve all of your problems.
Of course not. I'm not saying that.
It does make the world go round, though. It does.
But it just highlight, at least to me, where his perspective is at and where his mind is at and how he views certain things in the world. It's almost like that saying, like, first world problems. I mean, everybody jokes about, like, oh, like this and that. couldn't get my Starbucks today, first world problems, stuff like that. But I'm like, at least people are cognizant of the fact that you're acting entitled. And this guy was like, I couldn't make it. If it wasn't for my $30 million, I wouldn't be here. And I'm like, man, that's like 1%er problems, like, so it's kind of, it's an odd look, or at least a bad look, I think, to sit there and be like, woe is me. And then say like, I'm struggling financially. I'm not taking the fact away that he's probably had a struggle mentally throughout this whole process,
Which they didn't touch on that at all during the interview. So I think that there's a lot of things that I was glad they shed light on. But what kind of pissed me off was the fact, and I don't know if he can't talk about it, or if he didn't feel comfortable talking about it, or if Oprah just flat out didn't ask him. But I'm like, can we talk about what your mental health struggles are during this time? Because you're sitting here saying, like, he has first world problems, and not even that. He has like royal family
he has
problems.
1%er problems.
Yeah, like 1% of the world. So, if anything, I have to be like that person that's like...
Hold on, time out. I think 1% of the world is actually like the United States. So I think most people in the United States would be considered of that 1%. So he's like even up that, what I'm saying?
But I will say that maybe my head is too much in the clouds, but I look at him and I just think of how much of a culture shock are you in right now? Like, think of all the things he's taking on, because everybody was like, poor Meghan, poor Meghan, poor Meghan. But his world is upside down. And maybe he wasn't living realistically, and maybe he was, but Meghan knew, hey, I'm stepping into this. He didn't see like, hey, I'm going to step out of this. Like, that was a decision that they had to make on the fly as he saw, oh, okay, we're 8 days into this, and this is what the rest of life is going to look like if we stay here in the family and do business.
And I'm glad you highlighted that, because as I was watching the interview, Meghan was talking about like how culture shocked she was going into that whole thing. Like, even though she was in Hollywood and all that stuff, right? Glitz and glamour, and she was like making pretty decent money, it still doesn't compare to the amount of wealth that you're stepping into and the status that you're stepping into, right? So she said she was culture shocked. She hit on like, oh, I had a curtsy before the queen, and a lot of people were like, duh, of course you're gonna curtsy. And she was talking about like, I didn't even know who like really the royal family was, and people were like kind of in awe, and they were like, how could you not know who they are? She
was lying.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna lie. Like, for me, that world was like, I was totally disassociated with that. Like, I didn't even know who Prince Harry was until like the past couple years, like when all this kind of started going down. I didn't even really know who Princess Diana was, because this isn't my family's from Mexico, so for them, like they honestly could care less, and they didn't really follow it. Telemundo's not following Prince Harry like that, so that was kind of like an American thing for me. The only time I ever remember was like I was in school. They were like, Princess Diana died, and I was just like, okay, who's that? And I was like, who's Princess Diana? And I remember people looking at me and being like, you don't know who she is? And they thought I was lying, and I was like, no, I don't know who this lady is. And people were like genuinely sad, and they're like, you're not sad. And I was like, I don't even know who she is, so how am I going to be sad?
Yeah.
So when she was talking about I didn't know how big they were, I could totally relate to that. I'm sure she knew who the royals were, because even growing up, I knew who they were, but I didn't know exactly the ins and outs of like the father. And this is aside from, even to this day, aside from a couple people within the royal family, I can't really tell you anything about it. I know Prince Harry, his brother, his dad, and I don't even know their names. I know the queen, obviously, because she's been there. I think they freeze her overnight or something like that, and they thaw her in the morning, like she's gonna live forever. But for the most part, I didn't. And Princess Diana, I didn't really know who the royal family was. But I still can't, it's hard for me to, I wouldn't say have sympathy, but I'm like, man, you didn't see this coming? She was talking about how culture shocked she was that she had a curtsy and she didn't even know how to curtsy. So he didn't even help her acclimate into that life, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then he was on that same interview talking about, I'm culture shocked, I'm out of my element, I'm in the United States, I'm away from my family, I've lost my family. And that's kind of all the things that she went through going over there. And now, obviously, he's like, oh, yeah, this is, yeah, I guess you're in a culture shock, like way later and battling some sort of racism or microaggression racism. And I don't even like the whole microaggression word, but so she's battling this whole thing, within the palace, within the family, and not necessarily gaining support from her partner, her husband, against the other people in the family. At least that's what she let off in the interview.
So you really felt like she didn't get the support she needed from her husband?
I think if she was talking about pretty much crying, wiping away the tears, holding his hand, and like going through dinner, and doing duty and honor and all that stuff, and being a part of the royal family, and like having to put on a brave face regardless, even though she was going through something traumatic, like he still dragged her out there. He wasn't like, oh no, we're not going to attend.
Well, he said that's how they do business.
I mean, again, he still didn't support her. Like, regardless of that's how they do business, that doesn't necessarily take away from the fact that he didn't support her in her time of need. He could have been the person to break that cycle and speak up, but instead he was like, no, keep going along with this like whole toxic family and the how we handle things in a toxic way. Just shh, and this is how it is.
True, but I think in a way you don't know what you don't know, right? And we talk about expanding your paradigm. And when you are born into a world like that, you don't really think that that's an option for you. You just think this is what we do and this is how we do it and that's it. And I actually commend Meghan because I'm like, it took an American biracial woman to get up in there and be like, no, we're not doing this. We're not playing this game. And they were out. Because as soon as they made the announcement that they were leaving, I was for it. So, I mean, maybe you're right. I think you're probably right. I'll give you that he didn't give her the amount of support she needed. But he said, it takes a day for me to put myself in her shoes to understand what she was going through. And I think that you can't sit there and criticize him for not giving her enough support when he grew up in a world where this is all he's seen. And maybe doing that maybe he didn't have enough self-awareness to be like, hey, not cool. We need to cut this shit. You're not going to help. All right, we're out. Because obviously somewhere down the line, somebody nudged enough to be like, we're leaving, we're out, and that's it. Which I thought was great because it's better than them staying there. True.
But also, I feel like the fact that he was like, oh, racism is now affecting me, therefore I will do something about it, which is totally not how you should that's not how you should engage or battle. Or this is somebody that, is a leader, right? An ambassador for the UK. And for him to be so ignorant on racial issues in the status that he's in, to me, is definitely not. I didn't know. Doesn't cut it for me, honestly. Like, it really doesn't. Like, you're a world leader. You're this. You're that. You're a person that's studied probably at studied, traveled the world, gone to different countries, you know, places like South Africa where racism is a huge issue, right? Up until
Because
today.
of their colonialism.
Yeah. The whole apartheid thing and all that. But people have gone over there in the name of that. And for you to sit there and be like, I didn't know racism was a thing. I'm like, man.
In his family.
You know, I'm like, you're a part of an empire that has battled for it. And these are definitely certain, and especially with what's been happening the past couple of years in the United States and definitely in the UK. Like, you can't sit here and tell me that you didn't know. And it's an easy cop out to be like, I didn't know, I was ignorant. Like that's a shit excuse for me. Or I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And the reason I don't buy it is, I think in 2005, this is the same guy that put on a Nazi uniform for Halloween and then is going to sit here and say, I didn't know, when they criticized him for doing that. So just the amount of ignorance, even since in 2005, like, you didn't learn your lesson, you didn't take the steps to educate yourself on why this was the wrong thing. It took for you to have a biracial baby for you to be like, hey, I'm going to say something. You know, that to me is pretty lame, honestly.
Well, let me ask you a question. Were you born perfect?
I wasn't born perfect, but
okay.
You know what? That's why I highlighted in 2005, he was criticized for this. They were like, yo, this is a thing. You can't be playing around with Nazi costumes. You know, there's still a lot of racism in the world, and he still didn't learn and understand. And every step of the way, right, he still didn't learn or understand. So I'm not saying he's not perfect, and I'm not saying he shouldn't be forgiven, but it's an easy excuse to be like, not until my baby was born, and born looking ethnic or with some sort of different racial background
features
than my own, that's when I spoke up. What if that baby was born with more homogeneous features of people in the UK? Would he have said something? Would it have been much more, as, you know, like a big thing, a big topic? Would it have drove her and him and the baby out of the royal family?
I think that...
So I look at it from that perspective.
You're right. But you just
Let me sip my tea. No,
yeah, whatever. I'm like, you just go too in on them. I think people are allowed to make the Nazi thing. That does kind of like, that's hella inappropriate. But also, I was like, well, damn, they just canceled Stassi Schroeder like a couple years ago because she was on the gram saying she's neo-Nazi, or she's Nazi chic, and she had on like a hat, and she legit got canceled for it. So
yeah, you can't be saying stuff like that. And I maybe I get where she was coming from. Like, I don't know, right?
Just a joke. She's like a comedian, you know.
Right. I was, time and place, right? Definitely within these past couple of years, probably wasn't the time or the places to say something like that. You know? So,
but I was just thinking when you're saying
no points awarded.
Okay, well, you know what, Harry, you're making us look real bad over here because I am all like Team Harry and Meghan. I'm like, oh my God.
I'm Team Meghan. I'm not necessarily Team Harry.
Well, what do you think he thought when he was getting into a relationship with the woman that's biracial?
I don't think he did think. That's the thing.
He's thinking about one thing. But
maybe that's how it should have been. He shouldn't have put a lot of thought into it, right? But if they were already commenting on her baby's features or color, how dark her baby was going to be born, I can assure you that was a topic of discussion, or she was a topic of discussion on how she was going to look with the royal family. without a doubt. If they were like, what are we going to do if this baby's dark and how are we going to approach it?
Well, why would they let him date her if race is such an issue?
I think, well, her background is weird. So she's actually has some sort of royalty within her lineage. It's Portuguese royalty. And I think they share the same cousin, like way, way, way back in time. So royals don't marry people that aren't royals. You know what I'm saying?
We learned that, yes.
So, I mean, if you watch Versailles, they're marrying their cousins, their nieces. This happened well into the 1950s, even with the Roosevelts, right? Like prestigious families marry within some sort of bloodline of a relation, or it's a whole weird thing that we can go down. I mean, they're far removed. I think they're like the 26th cousin, but still, the fact that they're somehow related because she has Portuguese ancestry that's royal, I think is a little odd. So, yeah, I don't think they would have blessed that, or they would have just. I don't think it's the fairy tale that people try to make it seem. I think there's always been some sort of
business behind it.
Even with
they are a business. They're a family business.
They call themselves the firm. When they were talking about their family, they weren't like my family. They were talking about my firm, the firm. So, and we saw that even with Prince Harry's father and Princess Diana. Like, they weren't in love, and you could see it plain as day. And then on top of that, you're talking about there's even speculation with Prince Harry even being the legitimate son to his father. There's a lot of speculation, rumor that I think it was like the tennis coach. She had an affair, and then you look at the tennis coach, and he looks
like Harry, just like Harry.
Just like Harry. It's kind of like Kim or Courtney and OJ, but right?
Oh my God, it's Chloe.
Chloe, whatever.
Look, I'm still waiting for that book to come out, but I like that you said that about Harry, because about the illegitimacy, because that's another thing that I don't mean to like make this episode be about the chisme. I was like, should I say it in Spanish or gossip? All about the gossip. But
that's all hearsay, obviously.
It's hearsay, but if the shoe fits and it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's probably the tennis coach's son.
And they look completely different.
Yeah. I mean,
like
we're talking like
brother.
He's a redhead,
Yeah.
So
and the tennis instructor's a redhead.
Was too, and
he
had
looks
just like the dad.
Like him. So it's odd.
So that was
and
something.
And he had the affair. She was having an affair with him. Yeah, she was. For sure.
And that was something that when he was saying that his dad was no longer returning his calls, I felt like they were like, hey, this is a perfect out to cut off, quote unquote, business, which is really like family. Like, this is our out. Which to me, when you think about it.
And he was the beloved Prince Harry over his other brother. He was more in the spotlight. Yeah.
So to me, to go through that, that's really traumatizing, especially
For sure.
Think about what could be going on behind the scenes with, is this my dad? Is this not my dad? And now this father figure I have that's quote unquote my dad is literally shut me off.
Yeah, that was interesting how he was like, I called my dad. My dad didn't return my calls. Therefore, I emailed him our proposal. And then he responded, or the firm responded back. And I was like, good God, like you need a lawyer to talk to your father. Yeah. That's a little intense.
But the thing is we're not talking about a normal family dynamic. Like, this is all a business. So when you're saying like he told her, wipe your face, we got the cameras are rolling, we have to turn on, because they said like it's our job to, as the royals, to smile and be on. And it's like, so you don't really have a life of your own because you're just working 24/7. And I just think that, this is my take, in some type of way you can look at this story And, like you're saying, like, it's not the fairy tale, like, it's not the princess fell in love, it's a form of business. But I feel like they really did fall in love.
I think it could be, yeah.
I see it more as a love story and less as a formal business opportunity or a business deal, because if it was a business deal, I don't think that Harry would have left.
True.
I think
I don't think he would have ever married somebody that wasn't a royal.
Okay? Well,
it just so happened maybe this one, the one that he picked, there was a bunch of other cousins he could have married, and this one was
he was
the cousin.
I like this one the best.
I like this cousin. I like this 26 related cousin. So I don't know.
I think that this story is unlike, we'll say this fairy tale is unlike what we're used to hearing. Because first and foremost, they shed light on the fact that the fairy tales we grew up reading, which I feel like I hate fairy tales before I had a kid. I always said, like, fairy tales are bullshit. It doesn't end up that way. It's so unrealistic. And then also, I feel like females overplay into fairy tales, and males always fall short of them. Meaning, females grow up thinking a Prince Charming is going to show up on a white horse and rescue me, and males don't really grow up thinking I'm going to get on a white horse and rescue a female one day, and we're going to live happily ever after. Am I wrong? Am I right?
Yeah. But,
okay.
I mean, I did think it was odd that they were trying to push the whole, like, she saved me. It's like the reverse,
I feel like she did save him. What are you talking about?
I mean, I'm sure she did. But they were trying to push that story way too hard for the Oprah interview, I felt.
I didn't think so. I don't even think they spelled it out. I would just like to give myself credit because I jotted it down on my little notes that this is a story of a heroine, right?
That's
as a
true.
female
Yeah. Well,
who saved the prince from the castle. He didn't even know that he needed to be saved. How sad is that?
Right.
She saved him. She really did, because when,
I do think that she pushed past obviously she was postpartum, right? The mental illness, the culture shock, that she pushed past all that in order to be like, yo, I'm not going to accept this reality for my kids or for you. And she was like, we're out of here. We're out. I do think that is pretty powerful.
It is, and that's a woman's tale right there. I just had to say that because it's Women's History Month, and it was the interview debuted the day before International Women's Day, and so I think that's an incredible story, like putting that spin on it. But I really, my jaw did hit the floor when she was talking about, that she had thoughts of suicide. And it's not something that you really expect to hear. But then the fact that you have to kind of play detective and think of the timeline and realize, like, oh, why she's saying this? She had these thoughts while she was pregnant, which that to me was pretty incredible, that she was brave and strong enough to go on Oprah and spill those details of her personal life. And I know people are probably like, she got it $7 million out of it. I would have said whatever I wanted to also. But when somebody says that they need help, I think that that's when you listen. And I always give people the benefit of the doubt because those are just things you can't come up short on.
Yeah, I did think it was kind of shit that everybody was kind of criticizing her, being like, you are faking this whole situation. And I'm like, that's pretty shitty. I don't know on what basis they had to stand on. They were like, you were making other people's life in the palace miserable. Like, maybe she was. Maybe she wasn't. Maybe it's because she wasn't in a good place mentally. Like, who knows? But I did think it was kind of I don't think it was cool that people were kind of questioning her mental health, and they were like, she's doing it for the sake of the story. I thought that was a little ridiculous. Just I mean, there's been a lot of actors or a lot of famous people, a lot of wealthy people that aren't really fulfilled in their life, and that, you know, they turn to suicide. It's really unfortunate. I don't necessarily think she would joke about that. And I think some of the posts that I did see, or memes, they were kind of saying like, you know, oh, woe is me, like, you know, I'm so rich, I'm so that, I'm a royal, like, and I have suicidal thoughts. I'm like, man, those things aren't one and the same. I mean, you said it earlier, like, you know, money's not going to bring you happiness, you know, and especially somebody who, we just talked about the whole Britney Spears thing, the last episode, and we highlighted on the fact that she was being chased by the paparazzi. She didn't have any time to breathe. And this is somebody who was also in the tabloids, chased nonstop with the paparazzi, couldn't leave. People were, you know, overanalyzing her, trying to make her a villain against what was, you know, kind of like America's sweetheart champion at the beginning, you know, because she was with Prince Harry, and now they want to see her in that same spotlight, kind of like Britney Spears. They want to bring her down, you know, because that gets ratings. That people like that, you know. They like to see her, you know, almost like fly too close to the sun and then fall. Like there's a lot of people out there that they like that. They like that sort of drama, you know. And it's not that this isn't the Truman Show. Like, this is somebody's life, you know. So I think, if you people do think she was making it up, I think you should rethink it, and you should just give her the benefit of the doubt. That Harry was acting like a spoiled brat, I think so. But I also think he in himself has a lot of mental health issues, probably from a young age. You're talking about a young man that lost his mother at a very young age and was told, hey, buck up, you know what I'm saying? Man up, get out there, get behind the funeral procession, and don't cry, and walk behind that coffin. You know, like, I think he was like, he looked like no older than like 11 or 12, and I couldn't imagine my son or even myself, you know, going through that whole thing and the spotlight on me, and, you know, you have to put on a face to go out there. And I think if he was raised in that type of environment, I do think there's some sort of like, definitely some mental health issues or something going on, depression or something. You know, you can't live life like that, you know.
It's called suppressing.
Yeah, there was definitely no sympathy between, you know, he talked about it, between him and his family. Wasn't able to cry at his mom's funeral. I think I read like some interviews that said it was hard for him to kind of process the whole situation, because he was going through this, you know, this duty and honor type thing, and they told him pretty much like where to stand, what to do, what to say, what to wear. So I think all those things, right, from a young age, and then going through this whole life of the Truman Show, right, pretty much, I'm pretty sure, without a doubt, I'm sure he has some sort of issues that he probably needs to work out. And I'm sure that he was suffering when he was saying, like, you know, she saved me, she saved me from this life. Like, I do believe that he's probably in a better place now. You know, I think for him it's probably hard to lose your family and your sense of security, even though that was, you know, even though I'm like, he's kind of a spoiled brat. I do think losing your sense of security financially, right, is probably hard for him. But I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world, and I think he needs to, you know, reframe his mind and relook at his situation, because that could be anybody.
It could, but and I know you think that way, because you're like, at any given moment, everything I have could just be gone. But I feel like kind of goes against everything that we say on here. But I also feel like somebody like that, you're just talking about somebody who made history, and like in the history of his family, like nobody's ever left and been cut off. So, it's
well, I think
scary.
his mom tried to do it, right?
Yes, but she married into the family, So in his eyes, he's like, I was born into this. This is going to be my life forever. And then imagine being told, nope, it's going to change. And, when you go through like something like that, it is culturally shocking. And like I said, just again, it really kind of irked me. And I'm hoping that he couldn't talk about it. And that's why he didn't talk about it. But I'm like, can we stop like not glamorizing, but putting women in the spotlight and discussing their issues, which I was, glad that she did touch on pregnancy depression, because that is a very real thing. And I was glad that, she was like, touched on the fact that you can have all these things that society pushes as a norm, and as society tells you these are things that are going to make you happy, and you can still be unhappy. So when I say that, I mean you can be married. She married the prince. She lived the fairy tale. She married the prince. She was in the castle, and then she was pregnant, and she still found herself in a deep, dark place. And I think it was great that she said that, because it really normalizes a lot of things. Like I just said, you're living life. Like, just because you're pregnant doesn't mean that, it's not an Instagram photo, okay? And it doesn't mean that you're injected with happy hormones. Like, pregnancy is really hard, and I don't think a lot of people talk about it. And I know it affects people in different ways, but that was a triggering moment for me, because when I was pregnant, there was so much change that I personally was engulfed with, and related to her in the sense of I wasn't living in America anymore, and my life had changed. And then when I was pregnant, I felt really guilty about having days where I just felt sad, like really sad. And
yeah. And I couldn't imagine
being at that level.
Being at that level of spotlight and being like, I can't even, cry in public, or, I got to stomach this for a long time and act happy. That's crazy. What'd you think about her wearing her jewelry? Jewelry?
Well, jewelry. You still fucked that up. You were the one who told me that she was wearing Princess Diana's jewelry. Yes.
And in the interview, when they were, I think Oprah was like, what would your mom have to say about this? And I know we kind of talked about it already. She kind of already tried to make the move to leave, right? Mm-hmm. Or tried to, but she was married in, and for pride, they weren't going to let that happen. And, both of them were pretty much having an affair. But I think Prince Harry, and they were like, she would be happy, she'd be smiling down on us. And she like grabbed her bracelet, because that was her bracelet. That tennis bracelet she wore was her bracelet.
Okay, I missed that.
And she like, grabbed it like a rosary bead or some shit like that, Throughout the interview, like when they talked about her, she would grab it. I did think one of the things I did think was kind of odd throughout the whole interview is she never named names.
Well, of course she's not, because they're held liable if they do.
Are they?
Yeah.
She said
you're gonna throw the queen's name out there? Really?
You think it was the queen that said her baby's gonna come out dark?
Yes, I think it was. I'm the Queen, Prince Charles.
I think it was one of the sisters.
You think it was one of the sisters,
or the
sister-in-laws?
Yeah.
I think there's only one, Abe.
Okay, I think it was the
Kate?
sister-in-law. Yeah.
I think that it was really because I said we've had a lot of racial injustices put in the spotlight in the last year, right? But this interview was watched by billions. so to me, I'm like, people all over the world watched this interview, and I was very happy that they brought this to the table and shed light on speaking about colorism and what colonialism looks like, because I don't think people are having that conversation in their living room. And
I mean, Prince Harry wasn't.
Obviously. And that is a very real conversation that happens when you are in a biracial relationship and you have a baby. And I don't think people realize that that's a conversation that goes on, and people do get concerned on what the baby will look like. I mean, and now on the flip side of it, everybody wants a quote unquote designer baby, or how dark is the baby going to be? How light is the baby going to be? What are the facial features the baby's going to take on? And I'm not here for it.
Yeah, I think it's hard for some people to kind of accept. My dad always says pretty much he doesn't, when people have asked him that, he's like, I don't care as long as the baby's healthy, you know? I think that's the right way to go about it. And then just because Mexicans come in every shape, size, and color, you're talking about like Canelo Alvarez, you know, he's a redhead, to, you know, we have Afro-Mexicans in Mexico, or very, like my grandma, she's very dark complexion woman, you know, but I don't like that it's still kind of a topic of discussion. And I didn't even know that whole thing about the ears. Like, oh, look at the ears, and that'll tell you how dark your baby's gonna be. Like, I didn't even knew that. You know, I was like, oh dang,
it is. It's a real
That's crazy.
thing. I just think of how would you have felt if, because I'm biracial, and when Levi was born, you know, everybody talked about how Levi's our son, how he has very light hair and he's very light complected. And I just think that if that would have been a conversation of concern when I was pregnant by our family, like, how would you have responded to that? Because to me, I would have been like, I knew this conversation was coming just from the way that I grew up being biracial. Those were things I experienced.
I'd probably be petty. I'm not gonna lie. I'd probably be like, he's gonna be dark. You know what I'm saying? Like, just you know, it doesn't matter. You know,
it doesn't.
Like, it doesn't matter, because what people want when they say that, they want him to be of light complexion. You know what I'm saying?
And can you tell us why? Can you get into a small bit about colonialism? So,
like in the when the Mexicans came, or when the Spanish came over to Mexico, right? Pretty much you had to breed if you had, you know, relations with an indigenous woman. You had to, and that, you know, if you were indigenous, you weren't able to have land. You had to. If you were of indigenous descent, you had to breed pretty much the indigenous out of the Mexican, in order for that Mexican to pretty much be able to own land, you know. So people automatically associate light complexion features with of being a higher status, you know. So that's everywhere, right? That was in the United States. It's like that. It's that mentality that they brought over, right, on the ships to Mexico, to the Caribbean, to the United States. So that's I think, for a lot of people subconsciously, I don't think they understand what it. Obviously, I know a lot of people in the Black community kind of understand it, but I know in the Latino community, I don't think they really take a step back and understand why that is.
Why we promote that,
right?
That light skin.
Yeah.
The lighter you are, don't go out in the sun. You're going to get too dark.
And that's a very general statement, because you're talking about also people now, you know, really, really, and even in Mexico, are starting to really embrace or have been embracing their indigenous roots. I know I do. So I know for a lot of people, it's kind of like a touchy subject.
It is. But I think people need to know that aren't biracial and aren't of color, that the conversation about what color the skin is going to be, it doesn't need to be relevant. And it didn't surprise me, but then it did. And then it was like that it came out, and then it was just one of those, like, just, like I said, I was triggered, and I was disgusted, and here you are thinking, because I think they said the majority of the Commonwealth, that the royal family doesn't do an accurate representation of the majority of the Commonwealth in the UK. So they thought
obviously not, yeah.
And they thought bringing Meghan in, that she would, it was said in the interview that she would be this wonderful representation of the Commonwealth, because we want representation, okay?
And again, back to the whole thing of, was it really a love story,
I think it was.
You're talking about she could, if they're looking at it from a business aspect, and royals are notorious for marry somebody from X, Y, and Z country or of this origin to unite the two countries and yada yada yada. I can't help but think that if they were talking about her baby's skin color, that also wasn't a topic of discussion of what she would represent strategically for the Commonwealth. And I can't help but think that they pushed at the beginning to have her brought on to the royal family as a good, almost like a good political move, a good business move. I have a feeling that's one of the reasons,
But then why kick him out? That's what I have to go back to. We're just going back and forth,
I think it has to do with maybe she was too radical or trying to ratify things too much within the royal family, and I think they drove her out of the palace. I think a portion has to do. I mean, it's all hearsay with Prince Harry possibly not being a legitimate son. Mm-hmm. And maybe the royal family was like, hey, now's the time. Let's get him out of here, and we can do it through this vehicle, Meghan.
Yeah. And I did.
It's all hearsay. Earlier. It's all hearsay. I don't have any proof, but just looking at it, I'm like, it's kind of odd. This whole thing is kind of odd,
It is.
And they did it to Princess Diana too, right?
I didn't really follow.
Yeah, they were nasty to her. I mean, he wasn't in love with her, right?
I know he treated her very poorly. Humiliated her.
Yeah. Why would you do that? You do that because you didn't want her around, maybe because the family thought, and Princess Diana, they kind of always portrayed her as like a very humble person, but the reality was she is of an aristocratic descent, like the Spencers. They have a documentary on them. Like, they're a very powerful family, and she was one of the people that, obviously, good business move. They're like, hey, here's this young girl. She's beautiful. She comes from an aristocratic family. You will marry her. So, yeah. I mean, and then once he was like, I don't really like this lady. She's too radical. She's not submissive. And maybe he was like, she doesn't let me have a side piece, So he's like, get her out of here. So.
Well, I don't think they needed to kill her.
I don't think they killed her, or maybe they did. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know. That's all hearsay. Her death was very odd also. So the whole thing is odd.
It is odd, but it's also a family business. So that's why I think it looks the way that it does. The firm, I think that it was just a message that, that billions of people needed to hear, that, just because you live up to the societal norms of getting married and having a family and enjoying, and as a woman enjoying these things that life gives us, like pregnancy, that it doesn't mean that that you live it out without, that you escape depression or suicidal thoughts. You can still go to a dark place. And I think it was great that they shed light on colorism. And I think that it was great that they shed light on mental health awareness and how.
For sure.
And I just want to end it with this, that we should be priding ourselves when we have the ability to practice self-awareness. My friends, life is a long journey and it's full of ups and downs. So please, please always ask for help. You can never ask for too much help when your mental health is at stake. Never walk with shame or regret. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at The Collective Journey Podcast. Don't forget to support your friends and rate us 5 stars on Apple if you're listening. Drop us a comment on Podbean if you like the episode. And we will see you guys next week. Abe and Courtney signing out. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Stay gold.